please join me in welcoming Gilberte Furstenberg.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much, Carl, for your very, very kind words. And thank you all for coming here. Such a beautiful day here at Austin. My first time at Austin, so I'm very excited too. And thank you for giving me the tour. My goal today is to present you with the Cultura project, which is a web-based project, which is designed, as you can tell, to develop student, and I quote, translingual and transcultural competence. It is a telecollaborative project that is based on collaboration between two different schools in different countries. But a lot of what I will say also is applicable to the teaching of language, the teaching of culture in general. And I hope that you will be able to extract from my talk what is outside of the realm of the exchange itself, and think about what it means to teach culture in the digital age. So I'm a bit, oh, okay. Far away. Okay, so developing students' translingual and transcultural competence. The reason there are quotation marks, because this comes from the last MLA report. It was published in May 2007, and it emphasizes the importance of developing our students, and I quote, translingual and transcultural competence. And I continue with the quote. Not surprisingly, in red is my own emphasis. Not surprisingly, the need to understand other cultures and languages was identified by Daniel Yankelevich as one of 5 imperative needs to which higher education must respond in the next 10 years if it is to remain relevant. And I continue with the quote. In May 2005, Senator Daniel Akaka made a similar point, and I quote, Americans need to be open to the world. We need to be able to see the world through the eyes of others if we are going to understand how to resolve the complex problems we face. And I continue, in the current geopolitical movement, these statements are no longer cliches. The MLA is prepared to lead the way in the reorganization of language and cultural education around these objectives. So this came out of the last MLA report. And in Europe, as you probably know as well, I mean, in the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages goes even further in stressing, and I quote, that intercultural competence and critical cultural awareness are not only a matter of language teaching, but also of citizenship education. So, I mean, the stakes are obviously very high, and the field of intercultural communication is growing very, very fast. In academia in general, and as it's becoming an educational priority in many different fields, such as also business and law. And in the field, I believe that in the field of foreign language education, we really have a large role to play, because we are at the crux of language and culture. We know what it's all about. And I believe we don't play enough of a role. And I think we do have a major role to play. And because, and again, intercultural communication is now increasingly becoming the focus of the language curriculum, and has finally come to the forefront of the language class. So it's an area that's really developing very fast, and where I really believe we have a strong role to play. So the goals of our projects, which we started before the report, we started 10 years ago, is to develop within a language class, and I emphasize that, students' in-depth understanding of the attitudes, concepts, beliefs, values that are embedded in another culture. I mean, that's very difficult to do. I mean, it's quite a challenge, because this is the invisible dimension of language. I mean, Edward Hall called culture the silent language, the hidden dimension. So the question is, how do you make something that's essentially invisible visible, something that's very hard to access, easily accessible? So obviously what was needed was an approach and a tool. So the tool, I'll start with the tool. The tool that we use is very simply the web, and it's online communication tools, because there is indeed a perfect synergy between the field of intercultural communication, which implies encounters with others, and the internet, which facilitates those encounters. And I will do a little digression towards my views of technology, because this is really where I've always tried to work. At the point of intersection between technology and pedagogy, as Carl was saying. I mean, to give you, I mean, I've been at MIT for 30 years. but they've never succeeded in turning me into a techie. I don't consider myself a techie. And when I first arrived 30 years ago, I had no interest in technology and no expertise. My background was literary. And until I met a particular technology, which is Laserdisc technology. That shows my age, but I'll admit it anyway. And in the form of the Aspen disc. The Aspen disc, I'm probably not familiar with it, but it was a disc that had been developed in the Department of Architecture at MIT. And they had taken pictures of all the streets of Aspen in many ways in different seasons, and put these pictures of all the streets of Aspen on the computer and with a joystick. It was a joystick by then. And you could simulate a drive through the city of Aspen, turn right, turn left, unless it was a one-way street. You could stop in front of a building, enter a building. It had nothing to do with foreign language, but I thought, what an extraordinary tool for language learning. It really met two of our main criteria, which is authentic immersion, and then allowed for very rich forms of interaction. So this is really what's been propelling me all these years. So I see really technology as a tool, and certainly not an end in itself, and a tool that really that allows us to do, and you're interested in working and us to do things we just couldn't do before with any other tool, and something also that will generate new modes of teaching and learning. And in fact, this is really what characterizes the MIT Foreign Language Project, which situates themselves at the intersection of technology and pedagogy. And we always try to, let's say, new tools inspire us, and how can they lead us to, how can we use them so that lead us into new pedagogies that are congruent with those tools, obviously. That's very important. Now, the approach, back to the Cultura project, the approach we use is very simply a comparative approach, and is really central to our project. And the power of comparisons and juxtaposition is a very simple and yet very powerful device. And I will quote Mikhail Bakhtin, the Russian theorist, social theorist, who wrote, and that will come clear as we go along, a meaning only reveals its depth once it has encountered and come into contact with another foreign meaning. It is only in the eyes of another culture that foreign culture reveals itself fully and profoundly. And I think you will mean an example of this. So what do we juxtapose? We juxtapose what is commonly called parallel text in two different languages which deals with a common topic, films or literature in the two different languages. And there have been other telecollaborative projects that have used this approach and used parallel text, such as Celeste Kindinger and also more recently Julie Belts. The second challenge we had for ourselves in trying to get our students to understand another culture, the choice of our level, we decided we would try the intermediate class, a third semester class, which is really not a very advanced class, but we were very, very interested also in trying to reverse the equation between language and culture. And usually in the language class, the study of language is at the core, and then the culture tends to be at the periphery. We really wanted to reverse that and make the study of the culture at the core of the language class. But of course, Cultura can be used at many other levels. So the underlying, and then I'm going to get to it in a second, the underlying pedagogical concept beyond Cultura is that learning about another culture does not obviously simply mean accumulating facts and knowledge. Culture is by essence, complex, dynamic, pluralistic, evolving. It's a really living organism. So that's even harder. How do you catch that? And so is Cultura project that tries to that engages learner in a very dynamic process. And process is a very important word, as you will see, of discovery, exploration, and inquiry, favoring a very constructivist approach to learning. I don't think I need to go into constructivist approach. I mean, I assume you know, but maybe I'll just I'll just quote one. The purpose of learning for an individual is for an individual to construct his or her own meaning, or not just memorize the right answer. The focus is on making connections between facts and fostering new understanding in students, etc. So the history of Cultura, it started 10 years ago. We started 10 years ago, and I've been working in collaboration with two colleagues, Shoghi Varin, who's now at Brown, and Sabine Levé, who is at MIT, back to MIT. And it was started thanks to a 3-year grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. And our first Cultura experience connected students taking a French class at MIT and students taking an English class at École Supérieure d'Aéronautique. We now moved on with different institutions now working with students at Polytechnique. And then, as Carl has mentioned, it's been adapted to other institutions and to other languages. So what is the Cultura? The Cultura Environment is really a blend of in-class and online interactions. Here's the story. You have a class, let's say the MIT class, students taking an MIT class, a French class at MIT, who interact for the duration of a semester, not quite a semester because calendars don't have exactly for a semester, but for at least for about 8 to 10 weeks, with students who take an English class at a school in France. And again, we work with Politecnique. So those students will look at a common website, which I will show you in a minute, a shared website. They will look at materials from French and American culture that are juxtaposed in us, will analyze them, observe them, and then enter in online discussion forums with their partner class. It's not just one by one, it's the whole class as a class. And then try and share their observations, make inquiries about why the Americans view a certain way and the French view it as a different way, and then they will take their observations back into the classroom and to talk about them, what they've discovered through their online interaction. So it's a constant back and forth between the classroom and the online environment. But it's really basically we meet 4 times a week, and the French students meet only once a week. For 3 hours. We meet 4 times a week. It really doesn't matter, but with a component, an online component. So what do students do? Well, the students decide to compare materials, as I mentioned, from their respective cultures that appear in juxtaposition on the shared website. And then they will exchange their observations about these materials via online discussion forums in order to try and gain an insider's view into each other's culture. So obviously in such an environment, close collaboration is crucial between the partner, because you need to have a common calendar, you need to select the content, the tasks to give at the same time, what forums to open at what time. So it really requires close collaboration. But it works. One needs to work at it, but it works. However, obviously, simply connecting students, does not automatically develop intercultural understanding. I mean, that's obvious, but it needs to be said. And that understanding has to be constructed around an approach, which I mentioned to you, the comparative approach, and be based on real content, which I will show you in a minute, as well as a solid underlying methodology, which I also will illustrate. And I think this is what Cultura has to offer, and I think this is why it's become a model. I mean, it's not the only one, but too many language departments are here and abroad. But again, as I mentioned at the very beginning, I think a lot of the materials and methodology that we use in Cultura, that's embedded in Cultura, can also be used for teaching culture outside of an online exchange. So let's go to the content of Cultura. Let's look at the website. This shared, are you following me so far? Yeah? Okay, so 2 schools, French students, American students taking French at MIT, interacting with French students taking English at the Politecnique. So we look at here's the look at the Cultura website, and this is the shared website that they both access from their own institution. And I'll show you the itinerary and the journey that they go. It's basically learning about culture is a little bit like it's a kind of journey that one takes. So here is the journey in a way that is epitomized by this curve, and on which there are a number of stops, if you want, itinerary to the stop. But before I go into those, here let me just point out two things. The drawing, this is not too easily recognizable, but this is Le Pont Neuf in Paris, and this is a Brooklyn Bridge in New York, and this is where the students meet, somewhere in the middle. And I also want to attract your attention to this quote by Marcel Proust, which comes from La Prisonnière, and which is eerily echoes what Senator Akaka mentioned that we read about. So I will read it in French. In English, sorry, translated. The only true exploration, the only true fountain of youth would not be to visit foreign lands, but to possess other eyes and to look at the universe through the eyes of others, which is very much what he said. So here is so we take students on a journey of exploration of the culture. The journey obviously has to start somewhere. For us, it starts, and I'll go back to it in a second, with a series of questionnaires that the students answer, each in their own language. I'll come back to them in a second. We start with words, very simply with words, and then we expand. And I'll show you that in a second. Then we expand, the students horizon expands, because it's very important to realize that here students find out about the culture on the basis of a questionnaire, the initial questionnaire that's filled out by between 15 and 20 people. That's not very many. You can't really base an understanding of the culture based on these 20 who come at MIT and École Polytechnique, for instance, which are very elite institutions. So the So we given access also to the students after they looked at the questionnaire to data and about that gives them an idea of national attitudes toward issues, to problems. So here they can look and explore at French opinion polls, and they can choose what area they are interested, like banque de sauvetage, or whether politics or society or health or whatever, and then they can do research and see whether what they have discovered by interacting on the basis of this questionnaire is really confirmed or contradicted by looking at these national opinion polls. We work with films. One that lends itself the best to intercultural comparison is, of course, Trois hommes et un couffin, Three men and a baby. As we go along, I'll go back to images at the end. It's a slightly different one. We work with the newsstand, where students will compare the New York Times and Le Monde, look at the front page of the New York Times, Le Monde, any given day, or follow a particular international event, the way it is presented in, let's say, the New York Times and Le Monde, and then make observations on the basis of that. And at the end of their journey, we give them access. Okay, we give them access to a library of text, which is still very small, where they will be able, for instance, compare the Bill of Rights and the Déclaration des Droits de l'Homme, and also have access to excerpts, literary excerpts of authors, for instance, American authors who've written about France and French authors who've written about the United States, to have this regard croisé. And we give them at the end of the journey, because it works very well in the sense that they will discover things they themselves have discovered that in the end they have been written by experts. And it's sort of a wonderful way of gauging what they have learned. And then there are archives, but we've archived, and that's open archive. We archived everything, but the students do not have access to that when they work with the project. We disable it, but archives, as Carl mentioned, are completely available. We've archived everything that the students have written, have said for the last 10 years, which you're welcome to look at. And of course, in the middle of it all, the forums. And this is where the students will interact about these material. Every single of these materials interact in the online forums. So let me now go back to the questionnaire, the beginning of the journey. And so the first thing they do is answer a series of identical questionnaires. So the first one is a bilingual site. So here, that's what the first questionnaire. So the first questionnaire is a word association questionnaire. Students are asked to, and I write, what words do you associate with the following ones? Let's say school, police, neighbors, elite, responsibility, individualism, freedom, success, power, etc. And the French students have the exactly same one, and they answer in French. The same words, but they answer in French. It's very important. The second questionnaire is please finish the sentences, sentence completion questionnaire. Again, the French have exactly the same questionnaire. What is a good neighbor? Is someone who? A true friend, a good citizen, a good student, a well-behaved child, a rude person, a good job, etc. And the next questionnaire is they respond to a series of hypothetical situations. How would you react? What would you think? What would you do if you see a mother in the supermarket slap her child? If you see a student sitting next to you sitting in exam cheating? So then what happens is that then the French students answer again in French, and our students answer in English. And then, of course, the most interesting part comes now when the students will compare the answers. So for instance, I'll just give you a few words. So let's say suburbs boys. So I assume quite a few do not understand French, but So here is suburbs and banlieue. Now, if you look in the dictionary, your suburbs is banlieue, banlieue is suburbs. But when you look at this, you realize that even though it's the same word, the socioeconomic reality behind us is absolutely different. And so here one dot corresponds to one student's answer. And so, for instance, on the American side, you can immediately see. Can you see well? Yeah. Okay. You don't need to put the lights out. Okay. So, houses, neighborhoods big, or people big, open trees, large houses, boring, can be boring, white, rich, childhood, children, soccer mom, family, etc. On the French side, ignorance, cité means high rise, doesn't mean city. High rise, high delinquency, difficult immigration, misère, poverty, violence. So obviously, it's an immediate window into the reality, and of course, every word counts. I mean, you can say 95, what is 95? 93, what is RER, what is HLM, and then immediately you are right into the heart of the culture. So, I don't have time to go into all these, but so here's an example. For instance, so what students ask, what do you see? What do you see? And of course, then you need to, from this, what do you infer? Obviously, it's not the same people who live in the French suburbs and the American suburbs, etc. So you can see that, for instance, also with the concepts. Maybe I might want to put it a little bit bigger. Can you see now? Or? Okay. So individualism, it's the same word. There's just an E in French, an extra E. But if you look at it, American side, the connotations are extremely positive. Creativity, essential, growth, potential, uniqueness, unique, different expression, unique, freedom, independence. In the French, it's danger, pride, failure, egotism, United States, egocentrism, isolation, negative, harmful. And yet it's the same word. And so obviously they have very, very different attitudes to a single word. So what we ask students to do is just look, what do you see? Well-behaved child, so interesting. Bigger, sorry. Yes, make it bigger. If we had time, I would ask you to tell me what you see, but no, we have. Is that good enough? Mm-hmm. So here, what students will see very quickly is that when American students tend, and I need to urge American students, we don't only have Americans, we also have foreign students. But so when I say American, let's say MIT students, I should say, that when they talk about a well-behaved child, they often talk about it within the relationship of the parent-child, who listens to his parents, listens to his mother, listens to his parents, The word respect other with good parents. The word parents is only used twice in the French. They will obviously notice that. And I will point these out. For instance, qui respecte, if I can... for instance, who respects everyone, his parents as well as strangers. And another one is who will know how to adapt everywhere and who will be appreciated by other parents. So what they can start seeing, it's just beginning at it, but they start seeing is that, okay, for the French, a well-behaved child is somebody who's learned his or her lesson well at home and is able to interact well and well behave to other people, les autres, and then we look at les vieux, les adultes, les vieux, les autres, les inconnus. Who are these people? Yeah. And one more example, whoops, that's pretty obvious, but it's a funny one. It's the bank employee. The question was, sorry, I went the other way. The question was, you go to the bank and your employee reads your name, which is unlikely to happen in France, but yeah. But anyway, I was a bit hesitant to this list because this is not, it occasionally happens, but it really brings out very interesting responses. So most of the American says is, well, it doesn't bother me, I don't care, I don't care much about it, I won't be surprised. It's okay with me. But the French, the first one, it doesn't bother me, but sometimes, je lui dis qu'on n'a pas élevé les cochons ensemble. I tell him we didn't raise pigs together. too much familiarity. Well, if we'd always speak together, it'd be a different story. Or je lui réponds en insistant. I answer him in insisting on the pronunciation. Monsieur. À chaque phrase, monsieur, monsieur, to show the difference. One I really like, which is really funny. C'était, je ne lui fais pas remarquer, je continue à l'appeler monsieur et à le vous voyez, elle continue de connaître monsieur. And one, je ne connais pas la moindre des politesses et de me vous voyez. Je le prends de haut, je ne sais pas comment on dit en français, en anglais. To prend de haut. How would you translate that? Well, anyway, to make him or her understand that he went too far, he or she went too far. Et l'autre, the really funny one is les airs de duchesse. Yeah, I can't find it. C'est là. Ah oui, je prends mes grands airs de duchesse. Like a duchess. Anyway, so what the students see, of course, is the excessive familiarity. When you're in a professional relationship, you need to keep your distance. But what they also discover here, that the tendency of the French to give lessons. They say, no, that's not the way you do it. Je l'appelle monsieur. I'm showing the right way to do it. There was something about je suis convaincue of his lack of savoir-vivre. Anyway, so that what we ask students to do, just look, and they really come with a lot of very interesting observations. So let me go back. What the next step is. The next step, so how view the process? So so how students work with these materials? Well, individually, we say look at the list of words. We spend 1 week on the words, 1 week on the sentences, 1 week, and they say, okay, pick up 3 words, for instance, that you find interesting, and analyze them. We give them worksheet, analyze them, and come back with your observations in class. You will share with the students, your classmates. In the classroom, they will share their observations and make connections from one document to the other, and that's very important, because it's really all about making connections. So for instance, we have the students work on the boards, whiteboards all over the room, and they stand. My students stand a lot in class. And so here is a group of students, for instance, they've worked on a good friend. So they're putting their findings on the board to see what they find, and they summarize. And here is another group of students working on a rude person. So they summarize and so through in groups, summarize a rude person, a good friend, or whatever. And then I ask students to go from board to board and see, do they see patterns? Do they see that when you say a good friend, there are the patterns that come out on the American side and on the French side. And by going, and so for instance, oops, what did I do here? Okay, let me go back. Let me go back to the class pictures. Okay, so here they are. For instance, they go back from room to room, and they share with each other what they see, their observations, and then ask them to literally make arrows. So here, for instance, they see mes plus grandes craintes, my greatest fears. So they see there's some connection with another context, and they write that, and they make connections on the board. Here, I don't know, you can't quite see them, but you have arrows that sometimes go from one to the other and extend all the way across the room. But that's a very important process, because it really helps eliminate. So first of all, everybody sees whatever is found, and it allows them to really look across the different situation. And by doing that, for instance, they will notice patterns indeed emerge. For instance, they will notice that the American students, when they tend to, when asked about a good parent, a good teacher, a good doctor, to focus on the affective nature. A good parent is somebody who loves his children unconditionally. A good teacher is somebody who cares about, a word that's very, very difficult to translate in French, a caring person. A doctor is somebody who cares. And the French will tend to look at, when they ask they tend to look at the role of the person. A good parent is somebody who educates his children in the French sense of the word, instills value, etc. A good doctor is competent, but is competent, but also knows how to. The French side will come out the savoir-faire, the savoir-vivre, the notion of savoir, which is a good boss, in somebody who knows. A good boss is somebody, yes, with whom I have good relationships and who cares about me, cares about employee. And so they really start looking at, see the affective. For instance, a very interesting one is, a rude person. Yeah, on the American side, tend to be somebody who hurts my feelings, who hurts my feelings, what feelings all the time. On the French side, never appears, never enters in the picture. And it has to do more with social norms as opposed to personal interactions. And actually, and then they discovered that it's very difficult to translate. I mean, I ask the French people, but how do you translate in French? Well, how you feel? How did that make you feel? I mean, this is a vocabulary that we have, or maybe a caring person, une personne attentionnée, maybe, but there is bienveillant, but it's not a very common word either. Anyway, so, and they will discover also, for instance, when looking across the board at situations, conflict situations, that one thing they tend, I mean, I always say that, don't say that the tendency that they see emerge is that on the American side, if there's a conflict situation, they'll tend to call a third person to mediate. If somebody's smoking in a non-smoking restaurant, smokes next to you, they'll tend to call the server or things like that. And where the French don't, the French will tend to interact more directly. I mean, they see that, and confront that person more directly. But that's okay. So we are the point where students are just looking, observing, making hypotheses. And then they will go and exchange views in the online discussion forums. Now that's in English. Okay, that's we'll get out. And then they will bring the commentary. So I'm at this point now, where the students exchange views in the online discussion. These online discussion forums are crucial, obviously, because they are the heart of the process. And this is where students share their observations with each other, what they've seen, what they've noticed, their perspectives. They formulate hypotheses, and it's very nice that they do it very spontaneously. They ask questions. The question is crucial because to get the ball rolling and to get into a dialogue. And they answer their partner's question in a continuous and reciprocal process of inquiry. So I'm going to give you some examples. So here is, I'm taking examples from all over the place. This is a pretty old, this is 1999, but I think it really illustrates very well the process. So, here, oops, I like this one because it says visiblement. Can you see it? Should I make it bigger? No? So yes, what's very important to understand, and that's a choice we made, a deliberate choice, but I'll come back to it in a minute, is that the students on the internet, on the online discussion, as well as when they answer the question, is write in their native language. When I say native, it's not quite, because again we have some foreign students, but MIT students write in English, French students write in French, and I'll explain to you why in a minute. So Alexis, so here is Alexis, for instance, visiblement, visibly. I mean, it was obviously visible. You could see it. Our conception is not the same, is very, very different. And let me see if I'm taking a few. And they all, Amélie, the French, it doesn't matter who starts the dialogue. It sometimes has to do with time difference. So Amélie say, nos différences, our differences are flagrantes. It's a net. I mean, there's a wonderful vocabulary, obviously, they're flagrant. And then we associate individualism to egotism, egocentrism, and you associate it with very, very positive values. And it says, obviously, our social behaviors are very different. And she says, no, I think that this fundamental difference is due to our historical and political and respective baggage. Individualism is for you a behavior that is méprisé, that is scorned at the expense, perhaps, of solidarity and teamwork. So clearly showing that for her, as a French person, she thinks that, well, if you're an individualist, you're automatically against teamwork. The two are incompatible. Solidarité, which is a word used by the French a lot. Michael will say the same thing. En France, il y a une connotation très négative, and manifestement, whatever. Anyway, so then comes Catherine, the first American students. Hi, everyone. When I first I felt completely shocked. The idea that Americans, hold so closely to themselves, scorned by another country. I mean, she couldn't believe it. And anyway, but then she expresses, and she explains why, and she tries to also respond to the questions of the student. For instance, she said, well, an egotist, for us, an egotist is also badly looked upon here. I mean, a foreigner is not an egotist, an individualist is not an egotist. And then she tries to respond to some of the questions. few of you mentioned the idea of group work as well. We believe that group work is a good thing. I mean, you know, they respond to their, you know, and somebody else say, oh yeah, in fact, we are encouraged to work in teams, etc. And then she comes very spontaneously. She goes to. She said, venture. Yes, okay. When I'm trying to say now, oh yeah, she's trying to explain why this difference. I do think it has a lot to do with the way the U.S. developed into a country. When the colonies were under British rules, most of the normal people did as they were told. But a few individuals realized that people deserved better as they got together and started their ideas and ideals, and that eventually led to revolutions, etc. So, and then Matthew will, you know, Americans will say, I agree with her completely, and makes a very, very interesting comments. As she mentioned, I mean, the United States grew out of a desire to be independent from Britain, whereas France grew out of a desire for equality for all. And amazingly enough, this is exactly what Alexis de Tocqueville says that he finds later. Amazingly enough, you know. Anyway, so what, and then you know, and then Ludovic, Ludovic. So you know, the French exchange of views and their hypothesis about why, and then Ludovic in the end says, I think that Matthew offers us a good synthesis about and the reason why we have different views, and he says, I think that, you know, we could both benefit, both of our sides could benefit. You know, we the French, you know, we would gain. By letting our imagination and creativity, individuals, develop. But there's also in the U.S. Sorry, side of the coin. If you push individuals too much, then don't you risk to be isolated? He still thinks that, you know, isolation means individual means isolation. And then the last student is worth commenting because she's, you know, that often also happens, and we see, because she makes two very interesting points. I've been saying we obviously have very different ideas of what the word MIT students in particular. So she really makes it. Wait a minute, we're MIT students. We don't need necessarily to think about. All of us feel the same way, and MIT students in particular tend to be the people who were the outsiders in the high school because they did better in classes and sometimes weren't so popular, etc. But she says, I think that among some other groups in America, individuals is not seen so positively. So she's saying, she's actually a foreign student, and she says, well, you know, wait a minute, not every American feels the same way. And there are many stories from people of different opinions, different fashions, being considered wrong or dangerous by their communities, etc. Okay, so this is an example of what happens in a forum. I'll give you, I probably shouldn't, well, I'll go past. I mean, you know, that is from a different form on the same word. You know, the French, don't understand. I mean, think that, you know, well, no, this was in response to an American student to say, why is individualism practically synonymous to self-absorption and egotism in France? And why, you know, what thing of Bateman mentality? And she said, you know, and she says, well, for us, it means to be egotism, and this goes completely against our motto, French motto, liberté, égalité, fraternité. She had it. If you're individualist, you cannot be fraternel. And where does this idea come from? Anyway, so students really share the discoveries, and this one she realized that it's a very American notion. Just briefly, another one, because I think it's a very interesting one also, it really illustrates very well the process that students go. This is based on the word family. The students have noticed that in the American answers to family, something I just briefly mentioned, is that the word love appeared a lot more. So let me make it a little bit bigger. So for instance, one big difference that I noticed in reaction was that the American side, love showed up a lot of times. However, in the French side, only 2 people used amour. And she said, I think that in America, there's a strong emphasis placed on cultivating a loving, caring, supportive family, etc., which is why love is one of the first words that come to mind. I was wondering what the French consider to be a perfect family. There are different strands of conversation. I will let the perfect family on the side, and then also about the things about whom do you consider part of your family. I'll leave on the side and focus on the use of love. So here's here's Gabrielle, Sur l'amour dans la famille, Gabrielle. It seems, it's true that it looks as if the French do use the word love a lot less, and she calls it a test. I mean, it's not a test questionnaire. Perhaps it is because there is no fear of not having love, liking love, so it's not a preoccupation, so we don't talk about it. And then in Gaël piggybacks, another French student piggyback and says, I also noticed the concentration of the word love in your responses. Perhaps in France it is more implicit, more hidden. This doesn't mean that love is not present. So showing very important, what's explicit, what's implicit, and it's very important. What is said, what is not said. The fact it's not said doesn't mean it's not there, which is very important. Somebody asked, are there other words for love in French? It looks as if, it was bonheur, soutien, entraide. Are these the equivalent of amour? The word love, Alicia, and she says, I think I touched on something very interesting about love being a more implicit emotion in France. There is America. Definitely in America, the word love is thrown around a lot. It is used a lot. So they're informing each other. They're explaining to each other the cultures, and word love is thrown around, is used a lot as a way of parting. That people say I love you before ending a phone conversation with their boyfriend, girlfriend, parents, or things, sometimes good friends. This is something that happens very often, and we don't think about very much. And she was wondering, what is the case in France? What do you say? And the French student says, and I'll translate, this question is really interesting. The French are, I believe, a little bit more modest, a little bit more discreet as to their more feelings of love. And she says, I just did a little survey in the class to know how many of us said, je vous aime, I love you, to their parents. Well, nobody seems to do it. And I myself included. But that being said, it's certain that this love does exist. So there comes an American student mother say she doesn't understand something. She's perfectly right. The interesting comment, Gaël. She says, Gaël was saying, well, the French are very modest about their feelings, expressing their feelings. And she says, well, I always thought the French were more open about their emotions. The French always seem to be kissing and hugging each other, whereas in America, people tend to touch less when they're in public, some people, etc. So she doesn't understand. So why do you say the French are more discreet? I mean, for her, it's an absolute contradiction. And smack is the answer. So then here comes the answer. The French are more modest in terms of their feelings, le fait de les clamer haut et fort, in terms of saying it aloud and verbalizing it and saying them aloud. But it's frequent, absolutely, to see couples kissing on the street. So she's showing the difference between the different ways of expressing emotions, verbalizing on the one hand, or showing them by your gesture, by your attitude, etc., which is also very, very important. So this is the kind of thing. Now, the characteristics of these forums, they're multiple. I mean, there's a form attached to every word, every phrase, every document. And they're asynchronous, and very important they're asynchronous. I mean, not only because of the time difference, but we also find that it allows for a much more reflective and deliberate stance. And as you've seen also, I forgot to mention, is that it's like a conversation that unfolds where students participate. It's not a one-to-one conversation. It's a conversation that everybody participates in. And it's led entirely by the students. We never interfere in those forums, for better or for worse. And it's written in the students' quote native language, because again, we don't only have American students. But this may be of less interest to you, but I find that criteria for successful online discussion, this is really based on our experience. I'm not saying this, but they are anchored. What makes them work, I think, is that they're really anchored on specific topics, which as a springboard. There's a word, there's a sentence, and of course then they take them wherever they want, and it changes from semester to semester, it doesn't matter. They don't. But there's something that there's a déclencheur, there's something that starts the conversation, and then they take it where they are. I think that works very well. It's not just, okay, talk about anything you want. They include statements, hypotheses, and questions, I mentioned. They assume continuous and reciprocal communication, and they, of course, need to be an integral part of the course. I mean, they're not just, okay, go out, and then we forget about that. Go out and then bring back what you found, your discoveries, and we'll talk about them, and then we'll rephrase them, and then maybe this will generate new questions. And the key to successful forum, perhaps, I don't know, and that's my own interpretation of it, is that what makes them really work, because they do work, is that the participants communicate not just to speak directly about themselves or each other, but to talk about a third object. They're talking about a third object, the materials which they're working on, they're analyzing, through which they will then reveal themselves. But I think it's this triangular, I think, which really makes it work. It's not just, okay, well, what do you do, and what do you do at night, on Saturday night, and how do you spend your favorite time? Now, I think it's important that I go a little bit, because it's a point of sometimes of contention for teachers, language teachers, the rationale for students who write in their native language in the forums. So one of the reasons is that all students, whether they're French or American, or Spanish, whatever country, can express this if they write in their language or their near-native language. They can express their thought as fully and comprehensively as they want. They're not limited by the linguistic abilities. They could never have this kind of conversation in a foreign language. Also, there's a linguistic dominance there's no linguistic dominant person in the group, because the French students are 7 or 8 years of English behind them. My students have only 2 or 3, and even in each class there are some different levels. So those who are better would speak more than others. So everybody's on an absolute equal footing. The added benefits of writing with native language is that the students, what my students do, they read completely authentic French, which they will need to decode and understand, and which of course greatly expands their vocabulary. And then in the classrooms and in their writings, they make use of the words that they found on the forum, and again, that really enriches their vocabulary and their style. And then maybe even more, also another is that the differences in discourse by the French and Americans immediately become visible and becomes yet another object of a cultural object of analysis. And this was a study that was done by the French students, actually. They were, for any given, this is students at Paris 2. We work with different institutions. Paris 2. I always follow my partner, and she teaches in different, Paris 2. And so this is a graph that was done by French students, a group of French students. They compared, so here the number of messages that people were sending, and then the number of instances where the use of the first person was I, or me, I don't know. And here the French student, and where I say I, and me, and you can see it here. And here's, for instance, an example of an American discourse. I know, talking about Fahrenheit, I was intensely interested. It led me, it surprised me. I was not surprised, I guess. I was not. I regard myself. I like to form my own opinions. I do not believe. I've been told by my grandma, she told my grandma, and the French talking about the same thing. Well, il est vrai que use of impersonal expression. Il est vrai que en France, en effet, nous Français, the tendency by the French to talk about nous, to make themselves the spokesperson of all the French. I mean, for some reason, nous Français. Il faut regarder impersonal expression. It is difficult. Un Français moyen, as if there's such a thing as a Français moyen. But again, this is not this personal involvement. Another example, even talking about individualism, which is actually, it turns out to be a perfect illustration. Kids, myself included, I work for a personal and unique style. And as an American, I feel that individualism is very important. I don't view it. It helps me. Being different doesn't make me feel lonely, knowing that I'm happy with who I am, boosts my self-esteem. And here's the French, and then you pour les Français, and then the use of the passive form. C'est de ce point de vue-là, the arguing, and then what does he do? He doesn't talk about his grandma, or himself, but he goes into. So anyway, so quelqu'un qui d'autre part quelqu'un individualiste. So what does he talk about? He doesn't talk about him. He talks about individualism, what individualism means, and he says, I wondered whether the meaning that the French gave the word individualism was the exact definition. He's looking for a very objective. So he goes into a dictionary. So a dictionary there, and so the dictionary, the French goes to the dictionary. The Americans exaggerate a little bit. Goes to their grandma, and so. But it's very interesting to see the discourse. It's really very different types of discourse. The American discourse, the user, the student tends, I'm talking about students, tend to put themselves in the middle of the discourse. And then where the French is individualism, the American it's in the middle. Individual in the French, they're outside and they talk about, they really don't talk much about themselves at all. But they talk about, you know. And then he asks what the definition, and interestingly enough, that's the definition they have, is the definition of the dictionary. Ne considérer que son intérêt, tendance, only the second time. Anyway. So I want to, again, I was here exchanging view in the online discussion forums, and what's very important, the students bring back commentary in the classroom and share their new findings with all the other students, of course in French. You know? So it's only on the internet and all that the students write in the native language. Everything in class, the essays, whatever, everything is in target language. And so for instance here, and I have to go a little bit faster, but here they will discover, for instance, a very interesting explanation of why in the situation where the French students, if somebody teaching, there's some answers, not every American student says, I'll tell the proctor or the teacher, but some do. But you never see that on the French side. And so the students ask, why don't you ever, you know, and there comes the answer, for instance, and he says, you know, you can't see that like a sympathy, or typically French sympathy for the cheaters, but rather the manifestation of reluctance towards informing in general, which is part of the collective French unconscious. Thank you. Merci. And then he goes back to the Second World War, and they say, yes, the period during the Second World War, there were many examples of informants with tragic consequences during the occupation of France by the Germans, and a lot of French, then called collabos, who were anxious to, you know, be well viewed by the German occupier, did not hesitate to denounce and to tell on their neighbors Jews and resistance. And he says, so it's not very surprising that we would not tell on a student who is teacher. It's very badly seen in French. And again, in the collective inconscious, and synonym with a pact with the enemy. And with the goal of saving one's own personal view at the expense of the other. Well, here, interesting one, for instance. And then they find interesting. I tell them, go there, see if you find anything interesting. We talk about, and they take that in class, and we talk about it in class. And here was an interesting point made by a French student who noticed, again, we go back a little bit to the expression of emotion. He saw that, like in a movie theater, nobody will really do much, except they'll like slightly differently. But what he noticed is that the American students would tend to express that I will feel shocked, I will feel, I would be upset, they would express their emotions, and then they might act or not act, whereas the French, anyway. So now, it's very important also to realize that not all students have the same opinion. I mean, neither the French or they know the French. There are many variations that come into play, different regions. Well, I'm from New England, I'm from the South, I'm from California. It's very different. And there are, of course, very strong disagreements among the French who say, oh, you're crazy, you must be crazy. You he's crazy, don't pay attention to him. And the role of foreigners is very interesting because they really bring a third kind of voice. They offer yet different perspectives. They're both outsiders and insiders, and they often play the role of mediators, actually, addressing themselves both to the Americans and the French, explaining to what their classmates may mean, and because they know they're foreign students, so they better, maybe sometimes they're interpreting the culture for the other one. Now, the study of language per se, is every document, of course, is a source of authentic language. I'm sure there's no point in my going over that much. And the answer to the question, there's sort of vocabulary, grammar, noun formation, relative clauses. I mean, un bon ami, un bon voisin, c'est quelqu'un qui, à qui, que, etc., qui dit bonjour, à qui dit bonjour, voilà. And the forms, of course, extraordinary source of language. Now, let me continue a little bit. How much more time do I have?
3 minutes.
What?
3 minutes.
What? 3 minutes? Oh my God. 3 minutes? Okay, aye. Okay, other modules, I'll go fast. Other modules, we have films and data, they express films. So they look at films, okay, 3 men and a baby. But obviously I have to go by here. the conversations continue because they've watched the films separately, not online, but they watched them separately. And here is a very interesting, the frame model. So French films remake Outside of Class. They compare the two versions and then exchange observations about the difference they've noticed. So here is an online discussion forum based on the comparison of the films. And here's Alison, an American student, MIT student, say, hi Sebastian, who's reacting to one a French student had said, hi Sebastian, because okay, what they're talking about is the treatment of the police is very, very different. In the original version, the French police is made fun of. The French police, they don't arrest the dealers, they don't know, and et cetera, et cetera. And so, and whereas in the American version, where they arrest the police, and then the police is doing a good job, and the police arrest the dealer, etc. So she says, I'm surprised to hear that you think the French do not accept authority well. That is why you think the men did not cooperate in the French movie. And she says, when she goes back, just to show you she goes back to the word association. In the word association for police and authority, the French responses were much more positive than the American. Also, I was looking at the opinion polls on the Cultura page, the polls that we give access to, although she looked for it. And one poll, she had found one poll that asked French people if they had faith in the police. 70% said yes. So there seems to be a contradiction here. What are your thoughts on this? And respond by the French student, and which is the contradiction between the poll that shows that 70% of the French do trust the national police, and the fact, which is actually this was before the more recent events, you can tell, I'm sure, and the fact that in the French film the police is being circumvented is characteristic of the fact that the French always do the opposite of what they say in public. And so again, throwing in another term, but really providing an insider's view. What do you say? If so, what you say is what you do is the same thing and not. They compare media, okay, they compare the New York Times and Le Monde, as I showed you. I don't have time to go into this. They compare texts and they revisit issues. And what's interesting is that, so they've read, let's say, a text by Simone de Beauvoir, L'Amérique au jour le jour, and here is, for instance, a typical number 5, Samia. She says, for instance, well, so we've been brought back to the topic of how we react to strangers, whether or not we're initially willing to smile. I think there's a lot of confusion from the previous forum concerning this topic. In one way, I understood that the French are more open to strangers and more willing to talk to them and offer have a drink with them at a cafe. On the other side, I understood the French do not want to disclose anything about their personal lives. Then I read the American, it's not a philosophy extract, actually, it's from an American, it's a sociology, say that claim that the French were so unfriendly, and the French, they don't have a word for friendly. So I just want a little bit of clarification, how much is correct. So they constantly ask, put things together, and constantly ask for, the paradoxes and things. And here, for another one to add, I'm surprised politeness is claimed to be the most important word in the French language. Is it really important that French to be polite to strangers? The common complaints I've heard about French people is that they're sarcastic and rude. I've witnessed a lot of sarcasm in the course of this forum, and a little bit of the rudeness. I'm having a little trouble relating. Could someone help me out, please? So the answers sometimes come, sometimes don't come, but we talk about it in class. And you say, maybe it depends on indeed, but maybe we have different definitions of what rudeness is, etc., etc. Other forums. We open different forums, not just actually on those materials, but for instance, let me bring, here, for instance, in the spring 06, so here the Word Association, New York Times and Le Monde. We have a coffee break. Coffee break is talk about anything you want in whatever language you want. That's quite popular as well. We have one called about paradoxes and interpretations, raise paradox across board, across situations. I've noticed here, and this is, so we really created a forum called paradoxes. What contradictions, the paradox, what do you see? And so now I need to show something else. Okay, the image module. Could you give me 5 more minutes? 3 more minutes? Okay. I think I'm getting to the end there. The image module is a slightly different module from the other. Oops, if I can. And we figured that, of course, right, have you seen the work with text and a lot with text, and that's the best, it's text-based conversations. But obviously images are very important. They really say a lot. And so we have one module that's called image module, and that illustrates where students themselves will upload images, not us giving them access to them, but it's the opposite, will upload images. And these images will provide another object of analysis to students to look at the cultural meanings of everyday objects. So here is the images module, and we so what here the idea behind it is as you can see, oops, this bigger. The idea is the concept behind images to allow students to illustrate their respective cultural reality and exchange views about them through images. And so the students themselves, they form dyads, they form groups and across the ocean, and then decide what they want to illustrate. The one example we have here, and I don't think I'll have time to show you more, but they're very interesting. So this is an example from for the 2000 spring semester, MIT and École Polytechnique. So the students had decided to selected advertising. Product advertising, and they'd make groups. One group decided about ice cream, another one about cars, another one about beer, another one about big shoes. This is the one about ice cream. So what the students do, they will upload the images, and they also put a text. Every image has its own form, online form. That's the description of the image. So here, family, kids. Whoops. So let me go back here. An important area of advertising in the U.S. is that which utilizes the family images, their products, family large obsession, etc., etc. So here, I just picked those three that the students put in, and here are three pictures taken by French student about ice cream, pictures of ice cream. And as the way ice cream is advertised in France, and with text, and then the text about les femmes, three magnums make the shape of a woman's body. Of a sexy woman's body, and then what students have the possibility of juxtaposing themselves. Interesting juxtaposition. and then they have forums on these, based on these juxtapositions, which they create themselves. So for instance, here's the French student starts, and she writes, okay, she explains why she thinks the French publicity is very good. And an American student, an MIT student says, "Ooh, I wonder if something like this would be accepted by the American public. It seems to me that ice cream advertising in the US is much more family-oriented, etc., etc. And it is unusual for sweets to be advertised as sensual, almost sophisticated. And no, you could never do this. You could never do this in the US. I could imagine this sort of advertising making soccer mom flies from the seats." Whoops. And I probably don't have time to go. There's a meta-media site, which unfortunately, well, I probably won't have time, but where we could see very interesting pictures, I must say. Oh yeah, here we go. It's very fast. So here's the advertising project, sorry. And cars, for instance, I have to show you cars, for instance. I don't know what's not. Oh, it should be. Okay, advertising project. Sorry, it should show. No. I hope somebody hasn't played with that. Oh, well, let me. Oh yeah, there they are. It's a bit slow. So for instance, so they can put video for video tubes. Oh no, this is. Okay, it's a bit slow in coming. I'll get some more. Oh yeah, here's for instance, it's a very interesting. Here's an ad for a car, and the American students wrote. I think the students who put that image, I think they're trying to make the car appear to be a kind of beast, very macho. They're definitely playing into their own stereotype here. And then the French student comment, he says, "Don't you think that this advertising alludes to the war in Iraq?" You know, because it's you know, they have it all. Excuse me, is that blood in your gas tank? And for the French student, that's an immediate, you know, which obviously was not intended, I don't think. And he says, you know, we see a tank that's in Iraqi desert, and the message is terrible. Does this mean that the blood of Iraqis is a gas that allows this car to function? I know, very, very. Very hard, and but they are very extremely interesting. You could see the points of view, the different cultural points of view. I mean, photo projects. No. There's one on coffee, which is very good also. Anyway, I don't have time to go. I need to go back. So I need to finish. And so is there an end to the journey? No, I can go on for another 2 hours. But anyway, no. Obviously, we're not asked the student to come to definitive statement about the other culture. But it's a process in which students, you know, are involved, that requires them to keep suspending judgments and be ready to revise them, question them, expand them, refine them in the light of new materials and new texts they're looking at and new perspectives. And Simone de Beauvoir, I mean, that's what she wrote when she first wrote her book, De l'Amérique au jour le jour. You know, I want to let you know that no isolated piece is definitive judgment. You know, it's the accumulation of what I know that forms my opinion. So I probably don't have time, but I can go into how do you evaluate students' cultural understanding. I mean, obviously, portfolios, we have them write what they discover every week, what they find, what they learned, what surprises them. And anyway, and last minute. And what lessons, I mean, for us all, I think we're very far away clearly at the time when the teacher was had the monopoly of culture, and we're the only voice of authority. And culture, you know, was reduced to a checklist of facts, and the teacher was teaching culture. But now, of course, it's students who are the center of the learning, who put, you know, they add in the middle of a great variety of materials, they gradually construct their understanding, you know, at the board, in groups, in a discussion with their partners, and their role is really to explore, question, and interpret. And so what even without the exchange, you know, so methodology is based on process, it's based on comparative approach, but you can even use that. I mean, they can compare New York Times and Le Monde, specific product advertised, equivalent website, they compare, for instance, a French embassy in Washington, D.C. and the American embassy in Paris. What did that? It really shows, very revealing as well. And students work with archives. Actually, it turns out that this semester, at the last minute, my partner couldn't do it. And so we worked with archives where the students work with, actually, they add to the base of knowledge by creating wikis. I mean, I don't have time to show it, but oops. They witty and they find themselves different interpretation of things. And then my last slide, I think. The role of teacher. And setup, obviously, very different. That the role is to set up tasks that will encourage students to keep searching, probing, and interpreting, and turning them really basically into anthropologists, you know, whose basic overall task then is to constantly dig further and to try and put together the different fragments of the cultural puzzle, and together, including contradiction and paradoxes. And the goal, obviously, with the goal of helping students become competent intercultural learners and researchers. This is where I will end. So I'm sorry that I've taken more time.
I know. A little reception.
Yes.
But why don't you take
1 minute? Somebody asked me about how do you evaluate. Yes, and I'm sorry that I really escamoté. Yes. So I mean, I don't have all the answers to it, but it's an very interesting issue, because usually one evaluates. What does one evaluate? One evaluates a product. Here, one is a process. How do you evaluate a process? So obviously, the most congruent kind of tool is really the carnet, what we call carnet de bord, which are logbooks, basically. So here's some example where we ask, this is an old one, we need to put new ones, where we ask students, for instance, to fill out, like say, this is, for instance, the second week, what phrases did you look at? Okay, what did you, in class, what did you discover? On the forums, what did you find out? Okay, copy what you wrote, copy the response you got. Did this respond to what, did it respond to your question, and if it did, there was no response, well, ask again. And so it's really like constant meta thinking also about, so they also comment about what the French students say and write, and they comment in the margin, and they say, oh, that's interesting, I didn't know that, or whatever. So they're asked to comment again. So every time, comment upon comment upon comment. So that they do that very regularly. It takes them a lot of time. Sometimes I call it, my own personal journal personnel. What did you really learn? What did you find out? What surprised you? What you didn't expect? So we asked them to read either French or English. This is the third semester, but so they tried. This one wrote entirely in French. So that's one thing. But that's pretty. Then portfolios, which are basically synthesis. We asked them to write synthesis after, let's say, the third week in class. Actually, I have a very old example online, but it's a very good one. We asked the students to pick, after 3 weeks, pick one notion that seemed to you central to French culture that you've discovered, but put examples and make arguments in that. So here, this one, he picked the notion of order. Well, that's interesting. That cuts across for him. This was after the third week, after just the questionnaire, and the exchange of opinions. So anyway, so he says, what's very interesting is that they really mimic the French way of writing. En contraste, en évidence, en contraste, one doesn't really say that, en fait, c'est vrai, de plus, c'est très, no, they mimic by, and for instance, he will say here, but that's, he finds that life of Americans and the French, that the French are much more organized. So he talks about, for instance, un aspect très important in personal life. It seems that there are separate categories of relationship: family, friends, copains. I don't know if we call that was a difference between friends and copains, but the French make a difference, les amis et les copains, les neighbors, connaissances, and they don't want to mix these different categories. And it's really interesting. It goes back to he discovered, without knowing it, on mélange pas les torchons et les serviettes, which is a very French expression, but he doesn't know that, but he really basically discovers it here. Ils ne veulent pas, they don't want to mix different categories, and he says as evidence for the French who answered about neighbors, the neighbors are not friends just because they're neighbors. And so, an ami and a friend is somebody they've known, is not a friend. You have to have known that person for a long time. So he realized that the French make really very distinct categories in their different relationships, and talk in their personal relationship. Then he talks about within the family. It's very interesting. And then he talks about dans la société, se manifeste dans la société française at large, etc., etc. So after 3 weeks of they knew nothing about anyway. So
this is third semester?
Yes, third semester. Yes, this is a second revision. You have to. This is not deuxième révision. I think it's version révisée.
Yeah.
Non, c'est l'essai number 3, but it's version révisée. So it was revised. Yeah.
Gilberte, how many? I know this is Cultura is in other languages, and I know that people here from different languages.
Yeah.
What other languages now are doing this?
Italian, Russian, Spanish. I can show you briefly. I have here the Spanish Cultura at Barnard, and it's very interesting. Is Cultura between Barnard and oops, I'll tell you. I don't know what I did, and the university.
You can just click on that. Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing here. It's Why my mouse? Why I can't get? I don't seem to be able to get the mouse under.
Can you touch on
below
touch
this?
screen?
No. What do I do? I'm sorry.
You broke it.
Why is it? Yes, I broke it. Okay, here we go. But how do I make it bigger? Now it's within this window. Do you know how to? Oh, you don't see what I? Yeah.
Ça va, no?
Ça va? What about?
This is what you're reading from.
Oh, this is fine. Well, this is fine. Okay, so no, but I want to go back to where I was. Okay, let me go back. Okay, let me go back here. Okay, here we go. Okay, Topicas, Thomas. So here, temas, like Spanish culture, and then you have here the so for instance, patriotism.
So this course is also
no.
open as well?
Oh, he gave me the, it's funny because I saw questionnaires. Okay, yes, so, oh,
so
he gave me a password. I think I remember it, but I think this is, it didn't work. It's funny because it worked for me without having to even log into it. Okay, hold on a second. Topics, thema. Maybe it's here. Okay, maybe let's try that. Polite person. No. Oh, I'm sorry. It's interesting. Let me try again. This was, the password is 1, 2. I think it's 4 A's. Yes, there it is.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so they have the same, so polite person, and they use, what's interesting is that it'd be very interesting, we have a Cultura community site now where we hope to bring together all the different, all the archives from all the different languages so that we can start looking across, be very interesting to look across different cultures, what a polite person is. And actually the translation is very interesting, persona educata. I mean, that's interesting, a polite person, I guess, I don't know any Spanish, but yeah. But is that the same thing?
Eduqué.
But it's not, is the same thing as polite? Okay, right. So, but the translation is always an interesting issue. Par exemple, un enfant bien élevé and a well-behaved child, is that the real translation? Well, it's a very interesting. Anyway, so the idea is that we have this Cultura web. If you're interested, we have the Cultura community site where you have, a demo site and all kinds of, classroom. And this is in the Cultural Competence that we hope to, at some point, it's not there yet, to bring together all the different. But so far we have.
And I can say, if you want to explore this, just
yes, it's completely open.
All of these things.
It's completely open. So at least the French and for the Spanish, there's Spanish in Spain, Spanish in Mexico, at Brown. So yes, and.
Russian, you said?
Russian was at the university, I forget the name of the university, but yes.
Italian.
In Russia. Italian. At
and German as
Emory
well.
And German. German hasn't been recently. They did it at one point, but nothing too very recent. But yeah.
How much time from the course do you devote to this? It seems like it's a very...
It's the whole course, actually. Yeah, I should have mentioned that. Yes, it's the whole course. This is really the basis of the course. Yes, it is the course.
How do you then approach, grammar,
yeah.
structure?
So we really we embed it into the course. So for instance, we know the materials pretty well. I mean, obviously, when we start with the questionnaire. So the questionnaire, usually it's words that come up. The first questionnaire is words, okay? So we work with word formations, adjective, adverbs, etc. So we use that as a springboard, and then I have my students buy two things. Here's the materials. They buy a dictionary, all French dictionary, and the grammar. Yeah, that's what we work. So we do work with grammar. So we'll work with, formation, adjectives, adverbs, noun formations, whatever, the first week. The second week, when we talk about, un enfant bien élevé, qui, que, quoi, we take advantage of that to work with relative pronouns. On the third questionnaire, we says, I tell him this, I'll make him, we use with the personal pronouns. We work a lot with, we use that. And then we work a lot when we work with the subjunctive and or with interrogative form, we ask them to look through the forms and pick up all the different kinds of interrogative pronouns that they find, and then we work with that, and so we start from that, and then we go into a more structured with grammar book, but we extract the examples from there. And when we work with the subjunctive, indicative, well, obviously there's a lot of expression of opinion, so we ask them to pick up expression that they find of opinions, of when people express an emotion, surprise, whatever, and then bring that in class, an example, so we look at it. So we use a more inductive kind of grammar, but we also have a grammar book.
So it's entirely grammar in context.
Exactly. It's exactly the name of your book.
What an idea.
Yes.
Do you have a sample syllabus
I don't have one here, but yes. Okay, let me. For instance.
What do you do in the classroom?
I can send you one if you're interested in that. Absolutely. So you mean you want a weekly or a semester? A weekly, yes, I can certainly. It's a good, but I should really put that on. But yes, because we provide a lot of things for students. We provide sheets of analysis sheets. We provide them. We figure that the students, when they look at the document, they don't necessarily know how to analyze it and compare. They don't see much. so we really, give them the tools that will allow them to dig further. It's going to be simple. I mean, when we start with the dictionary, with the questionnaire, we really want them to really dig down. Sometimes they will tend to. If you say, okay, just look at it, what do you see? Most of the time they see nothing or very little. And so, but we can start with just count the words, what words, if we work with the word questionnaire, count the words, the kind of words that come, put them in categories. Can you see crossover from this word here, are they the same, are they equivalent or not? What words appear on one side, not on the other? This is also very revealing, etc., etc. So we give them very specific things to look at. What words have positive connotation, negative connotation, and then we always have a paragraph. Okay, and after you've done this, what do you see? What did you observe? And that's the basis of the conversation into the classroom after that. And they will share what they've seen, they'll go on the board, they'll go, etc. So it's a constant, yeah. But yes, I'd be very happy to send you a syllabus. But do you have any particular question about the syllabus? It's always, the syllabus is really based on the material, constantly on the material. And then we, absolutely. 4 days a week, Monday to, and we didn't start right away because, actually, no, this time we started right because we don't have a live, but it works very well, even without the for instance, even without the benefit of, we don't have the benefit of the exchange this semester, but as I mentioned, we asked students, for instance, based on by creating wikis. So here you will recognize the students here had, okay, this was a list of words, a list of sentences, and so we asked them to wikis. We said to the students, okay, le but de ce wiki, the aim of this wiki is to give you the opportunity to approfondir, to deepen your work on the words, phrases, situation that particularly interested you, and to add information or photos, something that will give an interesting angle. So for instance, here the students, they had looked at the word tax impôt, and they went to see, they found this information about the way taxes are spent in the US, the way taxes are spent in France, and then we look at that. What do they say? What does it reveal? Or a very interesting one about une personne bien élevée, I think, yes, a well-behaved child. A student found, this is an American student, she found, Magic Maman, yes, she found, very interesting, she found a forum of French women, French mothers, talking about what is un enfant bien élevé, but they're talking between each other about what un enfant bien élevé. I mean, so, it's not the students, why can't I? It's coming, yeah, it's a bit slow. And it's a very interesting, I mean, so the students themselves can, even though they don't have the benefit this semester, it's the first time we do that, but we say, we don't have the benefit, but they can add, they can find a lot of information. And I wish I could say it's very interesting about a mother saying, well, my mom, people tell my daughter, at one point, everybody said my children were mal élevés because they wouldn't say bonjour, they wouldn't say, what does, it really goes back exactly to qui dit pas bonjour, qui dit pas merci, and the importance of saying hello, etc. So you can have, and sometimes we will also give, this was a very interesting one. teachers can it's very interesting because the word respect often comes very often loud and clear. Qui respecte, qui respecte. So what do the French respect versus the American? French tend to respect rules, a lot of norms. C'est normal, il est normal que the importance of the norm. Il faut, and the respect. So we found this site, which is a wonderful site that was made last year by la RATP, and we tried to educate French people about le respect. And so, l'âge de pierre, the Stone Age, and respect. And manque de courtoisie. And so it's a wonderful. So here, for instance, they had le classement des gestes qui énervent. So here and so we ask students, it's a very wide, so we send them there and it says, okay, do you find, in this document, do you find echoes of what you found when you compare the French and the American? And they do. And so actually it's very funny, but c'est le respect des... so here is the, which is trying to say, les gestes qui énervent, the things that annoy the French in public transportation. And so, cliquez sur la carte, c'est le hamburger malodorant, the bad-smelling hamburger. It's pretty interesting that they would have chosen a hamburger. It's not des frites, whatever. And bruit de mastication, etc. And then again, they're very fun. They're very funny, actually. Things like le strapontin royal. Tout le monde se lève, mais seul le roi reste assis. But anyway, so they look at that and then I saw a connection, the importance, dire bonjour, whatever, la convivialité, etc. So it can be done in many different ways. Find a site that's fair and see, does this site reflect the kind of things that you found and observed before when you compared the materials you've been comparing so far? Yeah.
Do you have TAs for graduate
No.
students?
It's a very good question. No, we don't, and we don't. We're very small at MIT. We only have 2 sections of that level, French 3. So I teach it with a colleague of mine, and we are. But that's a very important question because, I mean, it requires it of TAs. I mean, Brown, for instance, has TAs at Brown, and they use Cultura, Spanish and French, and Russian, and they have TAs. But I think it would be. Probably impossible to have many sections. I think it would be very difficult. I think maybe 2 sections, 3 at more, because you really have to train the TAs. It's a different methodology, it's a different way of looking at things, and so yes, unfortunately, I don't see it working across very large sections. I don't know. Maybe you'll find a solution. You might find a solution, but I don't know. I don't have experience with that.
I wanted to say we tried here at the University of Texas.
Right.
We had a class. We did a simulation.
Yes, that's
so
right.
We had the French graduate students in our program who were acting like the French informants. And so at the end, we didn't do a pairing or twinning of classrooms, but our American students thought they were speaking to French students, and they were just graduate students. And
Did it work?
They never identified themselves. Well, it worked beautifully because at the end, then the graduate students came in and introduced themselves. Kind of blew their minds, but that was...
Yeah, I can imagine. But yes.
You mentioned, I'm not sure if you said that you have a colleague in France who was teaching the same course, and that's how you got together?
Well, I have my partner, because it is, it really requires a partnership of somebody who teaches. He teaches English, and so I followed her because she's good. I know her, but
How did you find her?
Okay, it's pretty much serendipity. It's not easy because at first I had another partner. He was French, and he was. It didn't work too well because I mentioned to you at lunch today. He was so concerned about what his student was saying, that they were giving a bad image of France, that he wanted to tell them, no, tone down, And I said, no, I mean, if you do that, that's it. I mean, let the students censor themselves. Yeah, I mean, sometimes we'll say, French students, again, I know pretty much much more confrontational than American students. I'll say things that, God, I hope not to an American student, I hope not everybody's as naive as you are. They allow themselves this and my students are a bit taken aback by that. But then very often I find that there is either a self-imposed mentoring monitoring, or by the other students. Okay, you keep quiet, don't pay attention to him. But anyway, what was the original question?
How did you find
Oh yeah, I found her. Okay, so I had this original one, and then it's really somebody mentioned. It was really, it's not easy. I tell you, but it's crucial. And what works well is she's my exact counterpart. She's an American living in France, has lived in France for many years. So somebody was asking me the question, how did you come up with those questions? The question at the beginning, while it was together, because we both, live and work in these two cultures, and so we know them very well. So we figure, but we change words every, not all words, but we add new ones, take away old ones. So together. So yes, so it's not easy because you really need to find someone who's, it doesn't have to be, she doesn't have to be the exact counterpart, but that's less crucial. But it's someone who adheres with the same teaching principles and who has the freedom to do that within her. And in Europe, if we're talking about Europe, it's not as obvious. It's not as certain. So it is difficult to find. Yes, but personal contact is really the best. For instance, at Barnard, I think they had an exchange or something, and they went with somebody.
So I guess the institution in France that would participate, would they have to have a similar syllabus?
No, that's a very good question. No, not at all. Actually, it's very interesting. No, not at all. They not in the syllables, but they would. Well, it can create some problems. It has to be the basic of the course, though. And sometimes it is not. That's a very important point. Sometimes it is not, because actually and it was not a good idea, and my partner decided to teach this with a class that was also at the end of the class taking the TOEFL. And so, wait a minute, it doesn't work. And so, she had to choose which class it would work best with, because you're right, it doesn't work with every class, and every class doesn't have as much freedom. But what's interesting, though, is that even though they are very different levels, what she does in the classroom is a bit the other side of the moon for me. She can do very, very different things in the classroom with the materials. For instance, they do a lot more semantic kind of field work with semantic words, semantic networks. They do a much more advanced kind of work, and that's fine. And I do a lot more grammar than she does, for instance, because our students are more advanced. So what happens in the classroom can be very different, but it has to be the major component of each course. Even though there may be other things around, it has to be. When it is not, then it becomes problematic. You're right. Yes. You mean both in writing or speaking? Actually, no. We look at for instance, sometimes if we look at the structure of a paragraph or of a sentence, I will pick out a good example of what I think is typical writing. There's one, d'une part, d'autre part, mais il faut savoir que, So we look at that, for instance. We'll take that as an example, and we'll really dissect it and look at what characterized the discourse, and so de plus en fait il est vrai mais il faut savoir, blah. So very structured. So we work with that very specifically. I don't ask them, and then almost, I could tell them actually phrase it the way a French person would, but what we've done once, which was very interesting, is that the question is in terms of evaluation. Now, who evaluates? With this kind of very open environment, once, and we should do it more often, once we had the French students evaluate what the American students wrote, and vice versa. So we asked the French student to write the way they think a French person would write, and then we had the French student look at that and rewrite it the way they think, a real. Anyway, so it was very, very interesting. We only did that once, and I think we should do that more often. Now, what's interesting also is that I need to say is that it's very interesting that since it's a text-based exchange, I really see enormous progress of in terms of the writing. I cannot say the same thing in terms of speaking. And in the speaking, you really have, I feel I really have to make much more systematic kind of exercise, vocabulary working, much more systematic. It will, even though they will use the word of French or so, but I realize there's a lot more systematic work that I don't always do and I should do. But it requires a much more systematic effort. It's much because, and I assume because it's again, it's the text is the basic mirror that they use. So yeah, yes. Yeah. Yeah, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this is a bit the goal of the Cultura community, which is really brand new. It doesn't have much yet, but create these things. We have actually a tool also. What is Cultura? So this is about what is Cultura, the methodology, there's FAQ. Pedagogical questions, we have everything there. Pedagogical question, other basic principle, then what language Cultura, when is a native language used, what is my role as a teacher. So we have an FAQ, technological questions, we have creating an exchange, teacher's guide, Cultura tool. That's a tool that's brand new as well. It's a tool that allows you to automatically create questionnaires. It doesn't exist yet in Arabic or Hebrew or Chinese and all, but we're working on that. And yes, and then there is a teacher's guide, a very detailed teacher's guide about introduction. What is it? First stage modules for what is the purpose of this guide? So we have a very, very detailed. But yes, that's exactly our end dream in a way. I don't know whether we'll ever get to it. Hopefully, yes. Hopefully, yes. Yeah. Oh yes, absolutely. Yes, for instance, we have a discussion board, and it's really not au point yet, but Teach Pedagogy Methodology Classroom for finding partners. So everybody's looking for partners, but we find a lot of people looking for partners, but no, no people offering partners. Yeah. Okay. Last question. Okay. Yes, that's right.
I think this is a very fascinating project. I was wondering in those forums whether French students and their American counterparts get a somewhat limited point of view and limited impressions. I mean, for example, I teach German here.
Yes.
And at least our German students, and that might not hold true for other languages or students that take other languages here. But our German students, they are typically a very homogeneous group, so they are white, middle class, they come from a background that, like, their parents value education and so on and so forth.
Absolutely.
And I think if I did something with my students like that, they would really perpetuate their impressions, myths, stereotypes of middle class, white American society.
Right.
So do you have a more diverse student population, or do you typically
We don't. We have quite a diverse student body, but more certainly than the French do. But it's that's why we give, when we look on the side, that's why we give them when they look at this. That's why on the site we always want to expand, because we feel that it's just the beginning and it's a narrow view. And then not only that, but it's MIT students. MIT students are, for instance, when you look at the questionnaires about my greatest fears for the MIT, fear of failure, fear of failure, fear. Well, that's typical of MIT students. So the French, but those questions automatically get asked. Well, is this typical of this? Is not typical? And then that's why we give this enlarge it, look at so issues of immigration come, but of course they're not. Very few students are for immigration. So, but some of them are, but not very many. So yes, I agree with you. It doesn't give. I mean, I cannot say it gives a complete. Yes, but these questions are raised all the time. And that's why and then you suddenly find a different point of view. You suddenly find somebody different who says something different. So you say, well, what's the validity of this? So they constantly compare. So it's really a constant process that they cannot in the end arrive to any monolithic view. I mean, it's obviously what would be fascinating is that we had once an exchange. There was a high school exchange done between, but it didn't work because it was in Lenox Memorial High School, which is a very white suburban, and they were interacting with students from a French suburb. So imagine, so completely, which is the opposite exactly of what now. And so, and the reason it was interesting, the reason it didn't work, and is that there were so many variations, so many differences that the student did not know, the American student didn't know, well, is it because they're French, or because they're not French, because they immigrant, because there were so many variations that it was very, very difficult for them, and to them to figure out, we couldn't expect them to sort things out. But what I think would be absolutely fascinating, for example, is for, let's say, an inner city school, American, and a French suburb school, la banlieue française, parisienne. And then where they would really, because they would live the experience of immigration, racism, and then work, and then I think that would be absolutely fascinating. Oh, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Within the same culture. And then you realize when you were absolutely within the same culture that you, in fact, have enormous variations. I mean, there is, geographical variations. Absolutely. But these issues always come together. They're not necessarily answered, but they come. Well, is this because you are this? Is this because? Is this because? So the issues, yes, they're very much aware of that. They're very much aware of that. For instance, if you answer the word police, and they realize that it's very, very, you would answer very differently depending on what you think. When you think about police, what do you think about? Do you think about the campus police, or do you think if you live in a campus in an inner city? I mean, you would answer very differently. So they become very aware of when you answer something, you automatically go back onto your own experience, and sometimes they ask each other, well, when you say that, where were you situating yourself? What were you thinking about? And so yes, so these things come. The questions are constantly asked. They're not necessarily answered, but they're constantly asked, which I think is important.
I need to stop because the video guys.
I'm sorry. Yes.
I want to thank everybody for hanging in here until 6.
Yes, thank you for going way beyond.